We all remember certain things that happened in the past that we recall as being better. We all think about experiences, whether it's like movies or video games, could be even people or certain activities you've done, just the order of how things were done. We always think back on those things and think how things were better or how this was done in a certain way, which was so much better. But this makes me think of the question in the sense of the title of this video. Were things actually better then? It's kind of a question you have to think deep into because it's not as simple as it sounds when you think of it and you go into it and you deep dive into it. And the reason why is because there's so many factors involved in how we remember things, right? Lots of things that can cloud our judgment and our memory of the past. Nostalgia is a big one, right? You have a huge internal bias for past experiences, right? That could be good or bad. Like you could remember a certain event or a certain experience being so fun and how amazing it was being with your friends or whatever. And maybe another friend could remember and be like, that was one of the worst times of my life, right? So perspective is a huge factor in it, and also just how you perceive it and remember it. And also along the lines of that is just exaggerating how good things were, right? Like, so we might remember something or think, oh, that was so good, remember that, except it actually ended up not being that good and it was just a little bit different. So something that comes to mind for me is I don't remember what little kids it was, but I came across we were watching, I think maybe it was with my little cousins. We were watching a TV show and they were saying this is like the greatest kids show or whatever. And then we put on another TV show and they're like, oh, this isn't as good as the real good shows. And they listed out certain shows. And I thought that the shows they listed out sucked and didn't compare to the shows that I liked as a kid. And what that made me realize is that every generation has this feeling like where whatever you kind of grow up with, you have a certain liking and attachment for and memory for. And it was very interesting because I remember the shows that they talk about as being like trash compared to what I grew up with, but it's also my internal bias, and in reality, they're all probably not that much different from one another, right? But another thing that is also factored into this question and our perception of it is how uncomfortable we are with change. And that's something that's pretty underrated when it comes to this question because, if something changes, when things change, people get uncomfortable with having to adapt to it. So let's say you're moving to a new job, right? Or like for example, I'll talk about me. I'm in a new job that I've been in the last couple months. And at the beginning or right now, it's been pretty rough. And I think about like in my old department, how much better it was. But now I also try to think about, well, I remember when I started in that department, it was pretty rough too. So it's also just part of the learning curve. And remember that, this is what happens when you're uncomfortable with change. It'll probably be worth it in the end, right? That change. But people being uncomfortable with change, right? And something changing, you'll automatically assume the simple-minded answer is, oh, wow, this is just way more complicated. It was way better this way, how we used to do it. But you're not used to the new way, and the new way could be a lot better, right? So it's a lot easier to keep things the way they are than change, even if it is for the better, basically is my point in that. So how do we know if things were actually better in the past, right? Like, how do we determine that? And it's really tough. And I don't think there really is a definite way to determine the answer. Honestly, it's just too complicated and there's too many biases internally inside you that are causing you to perceive things differently. like I had mentioned earlier, some things, we can all say that some things were objectively better in certain ways in the past. Like when you think about when you're being a kid, right? Of course it's better. You feel like, oh, I wish I was a kid again. But there's also things when you think about these things, when you think back, that were a lot worse, right? In certain ways. So like, for example, like when you're being a kid, you're like, oh, I wish I was a kid again. But when you were a kid, you had no responsibility and your parents ruled your life, right? Like they made the decisions for you. Like you couldn't go out and do whatever you wanted, right? So you have to remember that too. Like video games, you might be like, oh yeah, video games were so much better as a kid than they are now. But also probably they might have been better. But there's also the fact that you were probably way more obsessed as a kid playing video games and had the time to obsess on them, playing with your friends and whatnot, than you do now as an adult. Some people say, oh, music is better back when I grew up or back in the 70s. But you know what? Music has just changed so much, right? And I would say overall, as things go with like sports, whatever, music, and all these different things, like people get more talented at them as the years go, right? In general. So like the quality, the musicianship, the amount of like talented musicians we have now, there are more, and there's more music than was in the past, right? To decipher from and pick from. So that's also a benefit, but maybe you have a preference for the old music because it's what you grew up with and you have that bias for that inside your head. So I don't know if we're ever going to be able to determine if certain things are better in the past or if our brain is just tricking us into thinking that, but like, I don't know if there really will be a way to determine that. And I want to end the video by saying this quote that I've heard many times, but the quote is, I wish there was a way to know you were in the good old days before you've actually left them. And that quote kind of matches the video, or the topic of the video. So it's a tough thing to figure out because you never know, right? You don't know. And that's the tricky part of it. And that's it's one of the kind of magical mysteries of life. So I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion on this topic. What you guys think in the comments below. Do you think there's certain things that are objectively better in the past and they're not? Or do you think that part of the issue is that your brain is biasing that on your past experience? Like, it's tough to figure these things out, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys would say. I hope everyone's having a great night. We are halfway through the week. Yeehaw. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and peace out.